The Galactic Combat Academy stood like a gleaming monument to military excellence on the planet Zentera Prime. Its crystalline towers stretched toward the purple sky, housing the finest warriors from across 17 different species. For 3,000 years, the Academy had trained the elite forces that kept peace throughout the known galaxy. Marcus Chin stepped off the transport shuttle, his worn military duffel bag slung over his shoulder. The 24-year-old human looked around at his fellow cadets with curious eyes. Towering Crothery with their 4 arms and chitinous armor plates moved with precise military bearing. Sleek Vesperian pilots with their enhanced reflexes walked in perfect formation. The Serpentine Naga slithered past with weapons that seemed to float around their bodies through telekinetic control. Another human, muttered drill instructor Vextar, a massive Crothery whose lower arms ended in natural bone blades. Third one this cycle. Command must be getting desperate. Marcus had heard the whispers during his journey here. Humans were the newest species to join the Galactic Federation barely 2 centuries ago. They were considered primitive by most standards, lacking the natural weapons, enhanced senses, or telepathic abilities that made other species formidable in combat. What humans brought to the table was still being debated in the halls of power. The orientation hall buzzed with different languages and clicking sounds as hundreds of cadets gathered. Marcus found himself assigned to Squad 7, along with Chiron, a female Vesperian whose silver hair moved like liquid mercury, Thorak, a young Crothery who constantly clicked his mandibles in thought, and Zephyr, a Naga whose scales shifted colors based on his mood. "Welcome to the Galactic Combat Academy," announced Commander Sela then, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had seen actual combat across multiple star systems. The tall, elegant Etherian's blue skin seemed to glow with inner light as she addressed the assembly. "You are here because your species has deemed you worthy of learning the ancient arts of combat. Some of you possess natural advantages. Others will need to work harder to survive." Her gaze lingered on the human cadets for a moment longer than the others. "Your training begins with the fundamentals: close combat, weapons handling, tactical awareness, and survival skills. The galaxy is vast and dangerous. Pirates, rogue AI systems, and hostile alien species threaten peaceful worlds daily. You will be the shield that protects billions of innocent lives." The first week consisted of basic physical conditioning and weapons familiarization. Marcus quickly realized he was at a significant disadvantage. While other cadets effortlessly lifted weights that would crush him, he struggled with loads that his alien classmates considered warm-up exercises. During hand-to-hand combat training, Thorak accidentally sent Marcus flying across the training mat with what the Crothery considered a gentle push. Zephyr's natural flexibility allowed him to dodge attacks that Marcus couldn't even see coming. Chiron moved so fast during sparring sessions that she seemed to blur. "Pathetic," Instructor Vextar commented as Marcus picked himself up from the mat for the 5th time that morning. "Humans are weak, slow, and fragile. I don't understand why the Federation bothers with your species." But Marcus had something the others didn't expect. Growing up on Earth's colony world of New Texas, he had learned to work twice as hard for half the recognition. His grandfather had been a Marine who fought in Earth's last major conflicts before joining the Federation. The old man had taught Marcus that when you're outgunned and outmatched, you don't give up. You get creative. During evening study sessions, while other cadets socialized or rested, Marcus pored over historical combat footage from across the galaxy. He studied the fighting styles of every major species, looking for patterns and weaknesses. He noticed something interesting. For all their natural advantages, most alien fighting techniques relied heavily on brute force or overwhelming speed. "You're wasting your time," Chiron told him one evening as she found him in the training facility after hours, practicing basic knife forms against a holographic opponent. The instructors teach perfect technique developed over millennia. There's nothing you can improve. Marcus paused his practice and wiped sweat from his forehead. Maybe, but perfect for who? These techniques were designed by and for your species. What if they're not perfect for humans? Chiron's mercury hair rippled with amusement. You think you can improve on 3,000 years of military tradition in a few weeks? I think I can improve on 3,000 years of military tradition that never considered human physiology, Marcus replied, returning to his practice. The weapons training facility contained an impressive array of bladed weapons from across the galaxy. Energy swords that could cut through starship hulls, monomolecular blades that could slice atoms, and traditional metal weapons for training purposes. Each species had contributed their traditional fighting styles to the Academy's curriculum. Instructor Yalabin, a veteran Naga warrior whose scales bore the scars of countless battles, demonstrated proper knife combat technique to Squad 7. Her serpentine body coiled and uncoiled with hypnotic grace as she showed the standard grip, stance, and striking patterns that had been refined over generations. The blade is an extension of your body, she explained, her forked tongue tasting the air. For Crothery, it supplements their natural bone blades. For Vesperians, it adds reach to their speed. For Naga, it provides a focus point for our natural flexibility. Observe the proper grip. She held the training knife in what was universally recognized as the correct position throughout the galaxy. The weapon was held firmly, with specific finger placement that maximized control and power. Every cadet had seen this grip demonstrated countless times by their species' greatest warriors. Marcus watched carefully as each of his squad mates took turns practicing the movements. Thorax's forearms allowed him to manipulate the blade while maintaining perfect balance with his others. Chiron's enhanced reflexes let her transition between forms so quickly the knife seemed to teleport. Zephyr's flexible body could strike from impossible angles while maintaining the proper grip. When Marcus's turn came, he took the training knife and assumed the standard grip. The position felt awkward in his human hands, forcing his wrist into an unnatural angle that reduced his mobility and strength. He tried to mirror the forms he had seen demonstrated, but something felt fundamentally wrong. Adequate, Instructor Yalabin commented with obvious disappointment. Your species' limitations are showing, Cadet Chen. Practice the standard forms until they become natural. There is no substitute for proper technique. That night, Marcus returned to the training facility alone. He picked up a practice knife and tried to understand why the standard grip felt so wrong. His human hands were different from the clawed appendages of Crothery or the elongated fingers of Vesperians. His wrist joint had different flexibility and strength characteristics. He began experimenting with different grips, trying to find what felt natural for human anatomy. What if the perfect technique wasn't perfect for everyone? What if each species' advantages could be maximized by adapting the techniques rather than forcing everyone into the same mold? Marcus thought about his grandfather's stories of human warriors throughout history. Samurai, knights, soldiers who had faced overwhelming odds with nothing but steel and determination. They hadn't learned their techniques from galactic military academies. They had developed fighting styles specifically suited to human strengths and limitations. As he practiced, Marcus began to notice something interesting about human physiology that the standard galactic training hadn't accounted for. Humans had incredible endurance compared to most species, refined through millions of years of persistence hunting on Earth. They also had remarkable adaptability and pattern recognition skills that allowed them to learn and modify techniques rapidly. More importantly, human hands and wrists were incredibly versatile, evolved from ancestors who had needed to use tools for survival. The standard galactic grip, while perfect for creatures with claws or naturally weaponized appendages, actually restricted the full range of motion and strength that human anatomy could provide. By the time morning training began, Marcus had developed a theory, but he knew that challenging thousands of years of established military doctrine would require more than just theory. He would need to prove that his approach wasn't just different, but better. The opportunity came sooner than expected. Instructor Vextar announced that the next evaluation would be practical knife combat. Each cadet would face off against a training android programmed with advanced combat algorithms. The androids were designed to be challenging but fair, programmed to match the capabilities of each species while testing their weapon handling skills. As Marcus prepared for his turn, he made a decision that would change everything. Instead of using the standard grip that had been drilled into every cadet, he would trust his instincts and use the modified technique he had been developing in secret. The combat evaluation chamber hummed with energy fields that would prevent serious injury while still allowing realistic training. Marcus watched as his squad mates took their turns against the training androids. Each mechanical opponent adjusted its fighting style to match the species it faced, providing a challenge that tested technique rather than raw physical ability. Thorak moved with typical Crothery precision, his four arms working in perfect coordination as he deflected the android's attacks while striking with his training blade. The standard grip served him well, allowing him to channel the power of his naturally armored appendages. He completed the test with a respectable score. Chiron's performance was poetry in motion. Her enhanced Vesperian reflexes allowed her to dance around the android's attacks while striking with lightning speed. The proper grip maximized her natural advantages, and she achieved one of the highest scores of the day. Zephyr's serpentine flexibility let him attack from angles the android couldn't predict, his coiled body providing stability while his arms moved with fluid grace. Again, the traditional technique complemented his species' natural abilities perfectly. Cadet Chun, "You're up," announced Instructor Vextar, his mandibles clicking with what Marcus had learned was amusement. "Try not to embarrass your species more than necessary." Several cadets from other squads had gathered to watch, word having spread about the human who struggled with basic techniques. Marcus could hear whispered comments about human weakness and primitive fighting skills. He stepped into the combat circle and picked up the training knife. For a moment, he hesitated. Using the standard grip would be safer, expected. He might fail the test, but he wouldn't draw unwanted attention. But something his grandfather had once told him echoed in his mind. "Son, the moment you stop trying to improve is the moment you start dying." Marcus adjusted his grip on the knife, holding it in the modified position he had been practicing. The change was subtle but significant. Instead of gripping the weapon like a claw extension, he held it like a tool, allowing his wrist full range of motion and engaging different muscle groups for both power and control. The android activated, its sensors scanning Marcus to calibrate its difficulty level. As it detected human physiology, the machine adjusted downward, preparing for what its programming indicated should be a routine evaluation against a physically inferior opponent. The android struck first, moving with calculated precision. Marcus didn't try to match its speed or power. Instead, he flowed around the attack, using footwork patterns he had observed from multiple species techniques, but adapted to human biomechanics. His modified grip allowed him to redirect the android's blade with minimal effort while conserving energy. Instructor Yalabin's scales shifted to a surprised blue-green. Interesting defensive technique, but he's not engaging properly. Marcus continued to avoid direct confrontation, studying the android's patterns. Unlike organic opponents, machines were predictable once you understood their programming. The android had been designed to fight against standard galactic techniques, which meant it had specific responses to standard attacks and defenses. After 30 seconds of defensive maneuvering, Marcus switched tactics. His modified grip allowed him to transition between different attack angles without telegraphing his intentions. The android, programmed to recognize standard knife combat forms, couldn't predict attacks that didn't follow established patterns. Marcus's first strike connected, slipping past the android's guard with a wrist motion that the standard grip wouldn't allow. The machine recalibrated, increasing its difficulty level to compensate for the unexpected success. But this played right into Marcus's strategy. As the android became more aggressive, it relied more heavily on its programmed responses to standard techniques. Marcus's unorthodox approach became increasingly effective. His human endurance allowed him to maintain constant pressure while the android's power cells gradually drained from overexertion. The watching cadets had fallen silent. This wasn't the clumsy performance they had expected from the human. Marcus moved with a fluid efficiency that didn't match any known fighting style, yet seemed perfectly natural. "What grip is he using?" whispered a Crothery cadet to his companion. "I've never seen that hand position before." Marcus pressed his advantage, using combinations that shouldn't have been possible with standard technique. His modified grip allowed rapid transitions between offensive and defensive positions, creating openings that traditional fighters couldn't exploit. The android, designed to counter known fighting styles, struggled to adapt to something completely unprecedented. With a final flowing motion that combined elements from 3 different species techniques with pure human innovation, Marcus disabled the android, achieving not just a passing score, but one of the highest marks of the evaluation period. The training chamber was dead silent. Instructor Vextar's mandibles had stopped clicking entirely, his forearms frozen in position. Instructor Yalabin's scales had shifted to a deep purple that indicated profound confusion. Cadet Chun, Instructor Yalabin called, her voice carefully controlled. Report to the center of the training area. Demonstrate your grip and explain your technique. Marcus walked to the center, still holding the training knife in his modified position. Every eye in the chamber was focused on his hands, trying to understand what they had just witnessed. You are not using the standard grip, observed Instructor Vextar, stating the obvious. This is incorrect technique. Explain yourself. Marcus took a deep breath. This was the moment that would either validate his theory or end his military career before it began. With respect, sir, the standard grip is incorrect for human anatomy. It forces our wrists into an unnatural position that reduces both power and flexibility. A collective intake of breath from the watching cadets. No one challenged military doctrine, especially not a cadet barely 3 weeks into training. The standard grip has been perfected over 3 millennia, Instructor Yalabin said, her scales now showing the red tinge of anger. It is used successfully by every species in the galaxy. You claim to know better than thousands of years of military tradition. I claim to know better for humans, Marcus replied steadily. The standard grip was developed by species with natural weapons, claws, or different joint structures. Human hands evolved to use tools, not to be weapons themselves. We're forcing ourselves to fight like other species instead of maximizing our own natural advantages. Thorax's mandibles clicked rapidly as he processed this information. But the Academy teaches universal combat techniques. One method that works for everyone. One method that works adequately for everyone. Marcus corrected. But what if adequate isn't good enough when lives are at stake? Instructor Vextar stepped forward, his natural bone blades extending slightly in irritation. You suggest that our instructors, veterans of actual combat, have been teaching inferior techniques? I suggest that you've been teaching techniques optimized for your physiology, not mine, Marcus said, maintaining his respectful tone despite the tension in the room. A Crothery's natural bone blades make the standard grip perfect for your species. A Vesperian's enhanced speed works beautifully with traditional forms. But humans aren't Crothery or Vesperians. We're something else entirely. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Commander Silathan, who had apparently been summoned when word of the unusual evaluation reached the command staff. Her blue skin seemed to glow brighter as she assessed the situation. I understand there's been an irregularity in the weapons evaluation, she said, her voice carrying absolute authority. Cadet Chun, demonstrate this technique you've developed. Marcus repeated his modified grip and showed several of the movements he had used against the android. Commander Silathan watched with the analytical eye of someone who had seen combat across multiple theaters of war. Instructor Vextar, your assessment? She asked. The Crothery instructor's forearms moved in complex patterns as he considered his words carefully. The technique is unorthodox. It achieved superior results against the training android, but that may have been due to the machine's inability to recognize non-standard patterns rather than actual effectiveness. An interesting theory, Commander Silathan mused. Cadet Chun, would you be willing to demonstrate your technique against a live opponent using the same standard the android was calibrated for? Marcus felt his mouth go dry. Fighting an android was one thing, but facing a live opponent who could adapt and think strategically was entirely different. Yes, ma'am. Excellent. Tomorrow, you will face Instructor Yalabin in a demonstration match. Full contact, standard safety protocols. We'll determine once and for all whether your innovation has merit or if you've simply found a way to exploit training equipment. As the cadets filed out of the training chamber, Marcus found himself surrounded by curious squad mates and competitors. Some seemed genuinely interested in his technique, while others whispered about human arrogance and disrespect for tradition. That evening, word of the upcoming demonstration had spread throughout the academy. Marcus realized he had inadvertently challenged not just a technique, but the entire foundation of standardized galactic military training. Tomorrow wouldn't just be about proving his knife grip was better. It would be about whether humans could contribute something new to a galaxy that saw them as primitive newcomers. As he prepared for sleep, Marcus wondered if his grandfather would be proud of him for standing up for his convictions, or disappointed that his grandson had potentially destroyed his military career over a grip adjustment. The answer would come tomorrow when he faced one of the galaxy's most experienced combat instructors with nothing but an untested technique and the stubborn human belief that there was always room for improvement. News of the demonstration match spread through the academy like wildfire. By morning, what had started as a routine weapons evaluation had become the most anticipated event in recent academy history. Cadets from all years gathered in the main combat amphitheater, with standing room only as word reached even the advanced students nearing graduation. Marcus had barely slept, spending most of the night analyzing combat footage of instructor Yalabin in action. The Naga warrior had decades of experience and had trained some of the galaxy's finest soldiers. Her serpentine fighting style was legendary, combining the fluid grace of her species with perfectly executed traditional techniques. "You've created quite a stir," Chiron commented as she found Marcus in the mess hall, pushing food around his breakfast plate. "Half the academy thinks you're brave, the other half thinks you're insane. Which half do you belong to?" Marcus asked. Her mercury hair shimmered with what he had learned indicated amusement. "Both. But I've been thinking about what you said. Vesperians do have different hand structure than other species. We've always assumed the universal techniques were optimal, but what if they're just adequate?" Thorak approached their table, his 4 arms carrying multiple food containers. "My clutch brother sent a message from the homeworld. Word of your challenge has reached Craffle Prime. The military council is interested in the outcome." "Great," Marcus muttered. "No pressure." Zephyr slithered up to join them, his scales a nervous yellow-green. "The instructors have been in emergency session all morning. Some are calling for your immediate dismissal for disrespecting military tradition. Others want to see what happens." As they spoke, a commotion near the entrance drew their attention. Commander Sela then had entered the mess hall, accompanied by several figures Marcus didn't recognize. Based on their elaborate uniforms and the way other cadets quickly made space, these were clearly high-ranking officials. "Admiral Thexera from Federation Command," Chiron whispered, her enhanced vision allowing her to read rank insignia from across the room. "That's General Mordun next to her. And I think that's Captain Veltar from the Tactical Innovation Division." Marcus felt his stomach sink even further. What had started as a simple training demonstration had apparently attracted the attention of some of the most powerful military leaders in the galaxy. The pressure was becoming overwhelming. "Cadet Chun," Commander Silavin's voice carried clearly across the now silent mess hall. "Please report to the combat amphitheater for your demonstration. The evaluation committee is ready." The walk to the amphitheater felt like a death march. Marcus was escorted by 2 senior cadets while hundreds of eyes followed his progress. The amphitheater itself was packed beyond capacity, with cadets lining the walls and filling every available space. In the center of the combat area, Instructor Yalabin waited with the calm confidence of someone who had never lost a training match. Her scales showed the deep blue-green of focused concentration, and she moved through her warm-up forms with liquid grace that made the knife seem like an extension of her body. "Before we begin," announced Admiral Thexera, her voice amplified throughout the chamber, "let me explain what we're evaluating here. Cadet Chun has developed what he claims is an improved knife combat technique specifically adapted for human physiology. This demonstration will determine whether his innovation has practical merit or represents dangerous deviation from proven methods." Marcus stepped into the combat circle, accepting a practice knife from the equipment manager. The weapon felt familiar now, almost comfortable in his modified grip. Around him, the amphitheater fell silent except for the hum of safety field generators. "Standard safety protocols are in effect," announced the referee, a veteran Crothery warrior whose scarred carapace spoke of extensive combat experience. "Match continues until one participant yields, is incapacitated, or I call a halt. Instructor Yalabin, as the challenger, Cadet Chun will have the first move." Marcus faced his opponent across the circle. Instructor Yalabin was larger, stronger, faster, and possessed decades more experience. She knew techniques from across the galaxy and had faced opponents from every known species. By every conventional measure, this should be a massacre. But Marcus had something she had never faced before, a completely new approach to combat that utilized human advantages no one else had bothered to develop. He began with a traditional opening, using standard footwork to approach. Instructor Yalabin responded with classical defensive postures, clearly intending to demonstrate the superiority of proven techniques. For the first few exchanges, the match looked exactly like what everyone expected, a veteran instructor easily controlling a presumptuous cadet. Marcus absorbed the lesson, letting instructor Yalabin demonstrate her superior skill while he studied her patterns. Like the training android, she was using established techniques, but, unlike the machine, she could adapt and improvise. However, her adaptations were based on encountering variations of known fighting styles, not something completely unprecedented. After the initial exchanges established the instructor's dominance, Marcus began to implement his strategy. His modified grip allowed transitions that confused instructor Yalabin's defensive responses. When she moved to counter a standard thrust, Marcus's wrist flexibility let him redirect the attack to an unexpected angle. Interesting adaptation, Admiral Thexera murmured to her companions. He's using the instructor's expertise against her. Marcus pressed his advantage, using footwork patterns borrowed from multiple species but adapted to human biomechanics. His endurance training allowed him to maintain constant pressure, while instructor Yalabin was forced to use more energy responding to unpredictable attacks. The tide of the match began to shift. Instructor Yalabin's scales showed the orange tinge of surprise as attacks she should have easily countered slipped through her defenses. Marcus's unorthodox technique was creating openings that shouldn't exist in proper knife combat. He's not fighting like any species I've seen, General Mordun observed, leaning forward in his seat. Those combinations shouldn't be possible with standard grip techniques. As the match progressed, something remarkable began to happen. Marcus wasn't just using his modified technique to compete with instructor Yalabin, he was actually gaining the upper hand. His human adaptability allowed him to continuously evolve his approach based on her responses, creating new combinations in real time. Instructor Yalabin, despite her vast experience, found herself increasingly on the defensive. Every technique she employed was countered by something she had never encountered. The human's grip allowed rapid transitions between offensive and defensive positions that her training had never prepared her for. The watching cadets began to murmur with excitement. This wasn't the expected demonstration of traditional superiority. This was something unprecedented, a human not just competing with, but potentially defeating one of the galaxy's finest instructors using a completely new fighting style. Remarkable, breathed Captain Veltar. He's not trying to fight like other species. He's fighting like a human, whatever that means. Marcus could sense the shift in momentum. Instructor Yalabin was still formidable, but she was fighting a defensive battle against techniques she couldn't predict. Her traditional training, while excellent, had never prepared her for an opponent who didn't follow any known patterns. With a combination that blended elements from 4 different species techniques with his own innovations, Marcus managed to create an opening. His modified grip allowed a rapid transition from defense to offense that caught instructor Yalabin completely off guard. The match ended with Marcus's training knife at the instructor's throat, both combatants breathing heavily from the intense exchange. The amphitheater was absolutely silent as the implications of what they had just witnessed sank in. Instructor Yalabin's scales showed a complex pattern of colors that Marcus had never seen before. After a long moment, she spoke. I yield. The match goes to Cadet Chun. The explosion of noise from the watching cadets was deafening. Cheers, shouts of amazement, and excited conversations in multiple languages filled the amphitheater. Marcus stepped back from his opponent, hardly believing what had just happened. Instructor, Admiral Thexera called out, her voice cutting through the noise. Your assessment? Instructor Yalabin coiled her serpentine form as she considered her words carefully. Cadet Chin's technique is unlike anything I have encountered in 40 years of combat and instruction. His grip modification allows capabilities that standard technique cannot achieve. More importantly, his approach suggests possibilities for innovation that we have not considered. The amphitheater fell silent again as the full implications of this statement spread through the crowd. Are you saying, General Mordun asked carefully, that standard galactic combat doctrine may be incomplete? I am saying, Instructor Yalabin replied, that we may have been teaching one-size-fits-all techniques to species that require individualized approaches. Cadet Shin has proven that humans possess unique advantages we have not explored. The question now is, what other innovations have we overlooked by insisting on universal standardization? Admiral Thexera stood, her gaze sweeping across the assembled cadets. This demonstration raises fundamental questions about our training methodologies. Captain Veltar, I want a complete analysis of species-specific combat optimization possibilities. This may be bigger than just one cadet's innovative knife grip. As the crowd began to disperse, Marcus found himself surrounded by instructors and senior officials who had previously dismissed him as just another weak human. The conversation had shifted from whether his technique was valid to what other innovations might be possible. But Marcus knew this was just the beginning. He had proven that humans could contribute something new to galactic military science. Now he had to figure out what to do with that responsibility. Within days of the demonstration match, the Academy transformed into a hub of unprecedented activity. Scientists, combat analysts, and military theorists from across the galaxy converged on Zentera Prime to study what was being called the Chun innovation. Marcus found himself at the center of attention he had never wanted and responsibility he wasn't sure he could handle. Captain Veltar established a research facility in the Academy's auxiliary training complex, staffed with specialists from the Tactical Innovation Division. The facility buzzed with activity as teams worked around the clock to analyze combat footage, study human anatomy, and develop new training protocols. Cadet Chun, Captain Veltar called as Marcus entered the research facility for his third interview of the day. We need to discuss the theoretical foundations of your technique modification. The Etherian captain's blue skin pulsed with the excitement of discovery as she gestured toward holographic displays showing anatomical comparisons between species. Your human wrist joint has a range of motion 23% greater than the galactic average. Your grip strength distribution follows completely different patterns from other species. Yet somehow, 3 millennia of military training never accounted for these differences. Marcus studied the displays, feeling overwhelmed by the scientific analysis of what had felt like simple common sense. I just noticed the standard grip felt wrong and tried to find something better. That simple observation has revolutionary implications, Dr. Nethera, a Vesperian biomechanics specialist, interjected as she approached with data tablets in all 4 hands. We've discovered that every species in the galaxy has unique physiological advantages that current training methods don't fully utilize. Humans aren't just different, you're all different in ways we've been ignoring. The research had expanded far beyond Marcus's knife technique. Teams were studying Crothery bone blade integration, Vesperian speed optimization, Naga flexibility enhancement, and dozens of other species-specific advantages that had been overlooked in favor of standardized training. The preliminary results are staggering, Captain Veltar continued, manipulating the holographic displays to show combat efficiency comparisons. Species-optimized techniques show improvement rates between 15 and 40% over standardized methods. We've been teaching everyone to be mediocre instead of allowing them to be exceptional. Meanwhile, Marcus's daily routine had changed dramatically. Instead of regular cadet training, he spent his time working with research teams, teaching his techniques to volunteers from different species, and developing new approaches to combat instruction. The other cadets looked at him with a mixture of respect, envy, and confusion. You've become famous, Chiron observed as she joined him for lunch in the VIP dining area he had been assigned to avoid disrupting regular cadet activities. There are news reports about the human innovation being broadcast across 17 star systems. I never wanted to be famous, Marcus replied, poking at his food without much appetite. I just wanted to be a good soldier. Thorak arrived with his usual collection of food containers, his mandibles clicking with excitement. My clutch father sent another message. The Crothery Military Council is implementing experimental training programs based on your approach. They want to optimize bone blade integration techniques that have been unchanged for 2,000 years. Even Zephyr, usually the most laid-back member of their squad, was visibly excited. The Naga Combined Fleet is restructuring their entire combat curriculum. They're saying this could be the biggest advancement in military training since the development of energy weapons. But not everyone was pleased with the sudden changes. A significant faction within the Academy's instructional staff viewed the innovations as dangerous deviation from time-tested methods. Instructor Vextar had become the unofficial leader of this group, arguing that standardization existed for good reasons. Cadet Chun, Instructor Vextar approached their table, his forearms carrying official documents. You're to report to the disciplinary committee immediately. There have been concerns raised about your influence on Academy protocols. The disciplinary hearing took place in a formal chamber lined with the flags of all Federation member species. 5 senior instructors sat behind an imposing desk, their expressions ranging from curious to hostile. At their center sat Commandant Zarthul, the Academy's highest-ranking officer and a veteran of the last major galactic conflict. Cadet Chun, Commandant Zarthul began, his gravelly voice carrying absolute authority. Your recent activities have created significant disruption to established training protocols. Some members of our staff believe you have overstepped appropriate boundaries for a cadet. Instructor Vextar stepped forward, clearly serving as the spokesman for the opposition faction. Sir, Cadet Chin's modifications, while innovative, undermine the disciplinary structure that has maintained military effectiveness for 3 millennia. Cadets are beginning to question established techniques across all areas of training. This threatens the fundamental order of military education. Furthermore, added Instructor Morgeth, a stern-faced Etherian whose blue skin showed the pale tinge of disapproval. We have reports of cadets attempting unauthorized modifications to other established techniques. Some have been injured attempting to replicate Cadet Chin's innovations without proper supervision. Marcus felt his stomach sink. He had never intended for other cadets to attempt dangerous modifications without proper guidance. Sir, I never encouraged anyone to modify techniques without proper research and supervision. Nevertheless, Instructor Vextar continued, your actions have created an environment where traditional authority is questioned and established methods are viewed as inferior. This is dangerous precedent that could compromise military effectiveness. Commandant Zarthul studied the documents before him for several long minutes before speaking. Cadet Chen, your innovations have undoubtedly shown merit. However, the concerns raised about maintaining disciplinary order and training safety are valid. How do you propose we address these issues? Marcus had anticipated this moment during his sleepless nights over the past week. Sir, the problem isn't innovation itself, but lack of systematic approach to innovation. Instead of individual cadets attempting unauthorized modifications, what if the Academy established formal protocols for technique optimization? He gestured toward the holographic displays that had been set up for the hearing. The research teams have shown that every species has untapped potential. Instead of viewing this as disruption, what if we viewed it as opportunity to make our military forces more effective than they've ever been? Elaborate, Commandant Zarthul commanded. Establish an innovation track within the Academy, Marcus proposed. Advanced cadets could work with research teams to develop species-specific optimizations under proper supervision. New techniques would be thoroughly tested before implementation. We could turn the Academy into a center for military advancement instead of just military tradition. The hearing chamber fell silent as the committee considered this proposal. Captain Veltar, who had been observing from the gallery, requested permission to speak. Commandant, the research data supports Cadet Chen's proposal. We've identified potential improvements in every major area of military training. With proper oversight and testing protocols, we could develop the most effective military force the galaxy has ever seen. Instructor Vextar's mandibles clicked rapidly in agitation. This assumes that traditional methods are inadequate. 3 millennia of successful military operations suggest otherwise. With respect, Marcus interjected, successful doesn't mean optimal. Just because something works doesn't mean it can't work better. Earth's history is full of military innovations that seemed unnecessary until the moment they became essential for survival. Admiral Thexera, who had been silent throughout the hearing, finally spoke. The question isn't whether we should innovate. The question is whether we can afford not to innovate. Military threats evolve constantly. If our enemies develop new capabilities while we remain locked in traditional methods, We risk losing the peace our forces are sworn to protect. Commandant Zarthal stood, indicating that the hearing was reaching its conclusion. Cadet Chun, your innovation has created both opportunity and challenge. The committee will deliberate on your proposal for an innovation track. In the meantime, you will continue working with the research teams, but under strict supervision to ensure no unauthorized techniques are attempted by other cadets. As the hearing concluded, Marcus felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. He had avoided immediate dismissal, but the future of military innovation now rested partially on his shoulders. The decision would determine whether the Academy embraced change or retreated to traditional methods. That evening, as Marcus walked through the Academy's corridors, he noticed groups of cadets engaged in intense discussions about training methods, species advantages, and the possibilities for improvement. Whether the committee approved his proposal or not, something fundamental had changed. The galaxy's military forces were beginning to question whether good enough was actually good enough when the stakes involved the safety of billions of lives across countless worlds. 6 months later, the Galactic Combat Academy looked dramatically different from the institution Marcus had first entered. The new Innovation Wing stood adjacent to the traditional training facilities, its gleaming laboratories and specialized training chambers representing a fundamental shift in military education philosophy. Marcus walked through the corridors of the Innovation Wing as a newly promoted senior cadet instructor, wearing the distinctive silver insignia that marked him as one of the Academy's youngest innovation specialists. The irony wasn't lost on him that he was now teaching techniques that had once been considered dangerous deviation from protocol. Senior Cadet Chun, called Dr. Yalabin, the former instructor who had transitioned to become director of species-specific optimization research. The morning briefing is ready for your review. The daily briefing had become a galaxy-wide phenomenon. Military commands from across the Federation eagerly awaited reports on the latest developments in optimized training techniques. The results had exceeded everyone's most optimistic projections. The main briefing chamber filled with researchers, instructors, and cadets from the Innovation Track program. Holographic displays showed training effectiveness data that would have been considered impossible just months earlier. Current optimization results show consistent improvement across all measured parameters, Dr. Yalabin announced to the assembled group. Crothery bone blade integration techniques have improved combat effectiveness by 37%. Vesperian speed-optimized protocols show 42% improvement in reaction time applications. Naga flexibility enhancement has revolutionized their stealth and infiltration capabilities. Marcus reviewed the data with a mixture of pride and responsibility. Each percentage point represented real soldiers who would be more effective at protecting innocent lives. But it also represented the weight of knowing that millions of military personnel across the galaxy were now using techniques that had originated from his simple observation about knife grips. The most significant development, continued Dr. Yalabin, comes from human-specific optimization research. The initial knife technique has expanded into a comprehensive combat system that maximizes human adaptability, endurance, and pattern recognition abilities. On the display, training footage showed human cadets performing feats that would have been impossible using traditional methods. Their enhanced endurance allowed sustained combat operations that exhausted opponents relying on speed or strength. Their pattern recognition skills let them adapt to new threats faster than any other species. Most importantly, their tool use optimization allowed them to maximize the effectiveness of any weapon or equipment. The humans are becoming scary good at this, Chiron commented to Thorak as they watched the footage. She had volunteered for Vesperian optimization training and now moved with speed that seemed to blur reality itself. I'm starting to understand why the Federation was so interested in recruiting them. Thorak, whose own training had unlocked bone blade techniques that ancient Crothery warriors would have considered supernatural, clicked his mandibles in agreement. My clutch father says the homeworld military academies are completely restructuring their programs. Humans are being invited to serve as optimization consultants. But the real test of the new techniques came when the Academy received an emergency deployment order. A research station in the Outer Rim had gone silent, with deep space sensors detecting unidentified ships in the vicinity. The situation required a rapid response team with advanced combat capabilities. For the first time in Academy history, the response team would consist entirely of innovation track cadets using optimized techniques. Senior Cadet Chun, Commandant Zarthul addressed him in the mission briefing room. You'll be leading the human contingent of the rapid response team. This will be the first real-world test of optimization training under combat conditions. The team assembled on the launch pad consisted of 12 cadets, representing 6 different species, all trained in optimized techniques that maximize their species' natural advantages. Marcus looked at his teammates and realized they represented something completely new in galactic military history. Soldiers who fought not as standardized units, but as perfectly optimized expressions of their species' capabilities. The journey to the research station took 3 days aboard a fast cruiser. During the transit, the team continued training, refining their techniques, and developing coordinated tactics that took advantage of each species' optimized abilities. "Contact ahead," announced the ship's navigator as they dropped out of hyperspace. Multiple unidentified vessels surrounding the research station. They're not responding to hails. The tactical display showed 5 ships of unknown design maintaining position around the research station. Initial scans suggested they were heavily armed and using technology that didn't match any known Federation or hostile species. Pirates using stolen technology, assessed Lieutenant Commander Vextar, who now served as the Innovation Track's military liaison. They've likely captured the research staff and are attempting to extract valuable data before fleeing. The insertion was textbook perfect. Using optimized techniques, the team penetrated the station's defenses with capabilities that would have been impossible using traditional methods. Crothery with enhanced bone blade integration cut through security barriers in seconds. Vesperians with speed optimization scouted entire sections before alarms could even register their presence. Naga with flexibility enhancement moved through ventilation systems like living liquid. And the humans, using their enhanced adaptability and pattern recognition, coordinated the entire operation with an efficiency that impressed even veteran commanders. Research staff located. Marcus reported as his team reached the station's central laboratory. 12 scientists being held in the primary computer core. Pirates are attempting to crack the security systems. The rescue operation showcased everything the innovation track represented. Each species contributed their optimized capabilities in perfect coordination, creating tactical possibilities that had never existed before. The pirates, despite superior numbers and equipment, found themselves facing opponents whose abilities exceeded anything they had prepared for. The engagement was over in minutes. The pirates had expected to face standard Federation forces using predictable tactics. Instead, they encountered soldiers who fought with species-specific advantages that made them unpredictable and devastatingly effective. All hostiles neutralized, Marcus reported. Research staff secured. Station computer systems protected. As the team prepared for extraction, one of the rescued scientists approached Marcus with obvious gratitude. "You saved months of critical research data. The weapons technology we've been developing could change the balance of power in this region." "Just doing our job, sir," Marcus replied. But Dr. Yalabin, who had monitored the entire operation from the command ship, had a different perspective. "Cadet Chun, this wasn't just a successful mission. This was proof that optimization training creates capabilities beyond anything we previously thought possible. You've validated the entire innovation track program." The journey home was filled with detailed analysis of the mission's success. Every aspect of the operation had exceeded performance projections, demonstrating that optimized techniques weren't just theoretically superior, but practically revolutionary. Upon return to the Academy, Marcus found himself facing a choice that would determine his future. Admiral Thexera offered him immediate commissioning as an officer with assignment to establish optimization programs throughout the galaxy. It was an opportunity to shape the future of galactic military forces. "You've proven that innovation and tradition can coexist," Admiral Thexera explained during their meeting. "Your techniques preserve the discipline and effectiveness of military training while maximizing each species' natural advantages. The galaxy needs leaders who can continue developing these capabilities." Marcus accepted the commission, but with one condition: He would continue working directly with cadets and field operations rather than becoming purely an administrator. The innovations needed to remain grounded in practical application, not lost in theoretical research. Years later, as Commander Chin reviewed reports from optimization programs across hundreds of worlds, he reflected on how a simple knife grip adjustment had transformed galactic military doctrine. The Academy now graduated soldiers who were more effective than any in galactic history, each trained to maximize their species' unique advantages while maintaining the discipline and cooperation that kept the Federation strong. The innovation that had begun with questioning why humans should fight like other species had evolved into a recognition that diversity of approach was itself a strategic advantage. The galaxy was safer because its defenders were no longer constrained by one-size-fits-all solutions. Standing in the Academy's memorial garden, Marcus read the inscription that had been added to honor the Innovation Track program. Excellence emerges when tradition embraces change, and change respects tradition. It perfectly captured what they had built together, not a replacement for military discipline, but an evolution that honored the past while preparing for an uncertain future. The galaxy was vast and dangerous, but its defenders were now better prepared than ever to meet whatever challenges awaited among the stars. The human who had once struggled with basic training had become a symbol of what was possible when courage met innovation and individual initiative served the greater good. But, more importantly, he had helped create a system that would continue generating innovations long after his own career ended, ensuring that the Federation's military forces would never stop improving their ability to protect innocent lives across the galaxy.